Hi, everyone. We are going to get started in just 1 minute. All right, I have 8 o'clock, so we will get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining me tonight for the Athletics Preseason Webinar. My name is Kendall Zeslitz. I am the Special Olympics Maryland Staff Liaison for Athletics. If you have any questions that pop up tonight during our webinar, there's one of two ways that you can handle it. You can either raise your hand and I can unmute your line for you to ask your question for the good of the group, or you can always type your question into the questions box. It is just me on this webinar tonight, so I will be stopping every few slides just to scroll through to see if we have any questions, so please bear with me during those pauses. Tonight's session is also being recorded. I will send out the slides as well as the link to the recording and any other information that may be necessary tomorrow. That way you can have it for reference, or if you have assistant coaches who are unable to log on tonight, they can also reference that. So with that, let's get started. So this is just the agenda. It kind of shows everything we are going to be talking about. We will have an end segment of question and answers, but like I said before, if you have a question that pops up, please feel free to ask it during the presentation. So an important reminder that we always like to tell all of our coaches prior to the season is no athlete or volunteer may participate in any manner in a Special Olympics Maryland program without a valid and current medical form or volunteer application. There are absolutely no exceptions to this policy. So this isn't just your volunteers who come out and help with practice every now and then. This is also your coaches, your assistant coaches. So one way to stay on top of this is to work with your area leadership. Your area leadership, they are the ones who really know whose medicals are expiring and what coaches need what certification. So just always make sure that you are checking in with them prior to the start of your sports season. It's for the health and safety of our athletes, as well as for the protection of Special Olympics Maryland and all of our lovely volunteers. So the deadline for the 2019 Summer Games, which is right around the corner, it seems, we start with our first deadline, April 25th. It's our training registration deadline. That is when your roster needs to be entered into all of GMS. So all of your athletes, all of your unified partners, all of your coaches, all of your volunteers who are participating within your program, they can even just be participating during the season. They need to be in there. And that is how we know who's going to be coming to Summer Games. You can always cut that down based off of if a volunteer is unable to come to Summer Games. That's totally fine. We just want to know who's doing what during all of our sports seasons. May 6th is your next deadline, so that is the last date for missing forms to be submitted to headquarters. All of the forms for this year, whether it's an athlete medical or protected behaviors or volunteer form, need to be valid through the last day of Summer Games, which is June 9th. Also, all coaches and sports volunteers must have their concussion certification completed by this date, as well as coaches need to have their Special Olympics coach sports certification and their specific sports certification, sorry, it's a tongue twister, completed by this date. The next deadline is your competition registration deadline, which is May 16th. This is when everyone in your delegation must be entered into their events. Any athlete or unified partner who is not entered into an event on May 17th is going to be deleted from Summer Games. And then the last day to update scores is going to be May 21st. I know we have some athletics competitions that happen later on in the season, so please send your updated scores by May 21st at the latest. All right, so the current competitions that we have scheduled, we are starting our season off with the Anne Arundel Spring Games at the Naval Academy, and we have 3 competitions, which is awesome, on Saturday, May 4th. So I would really like to challenge all counties who have a track program to host a competition. It can be as large or as small as you would like. We just really want everyone to host so there's more competitive opportunities for our athletes. That is how they get better. It's great for team morale, and it's really just what we are pushing for. So every county, if you have not scheduled a competition this season and you would like to, please just reach out to me and let me know the date so I can make sure to put it on our calendar for all the other coaches to see. Head coach requirements. So I'm actually just going to jump forward to the next slide. We have actually had some change in the past few months with our coaching, education, and development progression. I'm sure you saw my very long email that had all of this information in it, and also your area leadership should have already discussed this with you prior to the sports season. But we've added a few more steps and a few more requirements for different levels of coaches. So you start at the bottom. You have your general volunteer, which is nothing different, the volunteer application, background check, and protected behaviors. Your next step up is going to be your sports volunteer, and if you have a sports coordinator for athletics in your county, they are going to fall into this category. So a sports volunteer is someone who's coming out to track and field, athletics practice and helping out with the team. They may not be an assistant coach, but they are coming and helping. They need to have everything that the general volunteer has, plus their concussion training. The next step up is going to be the assistant coach. So they need to have everything from the sports volunteer, but they also need to have the coaching Special Olympics athletes or the coaching unified sports training. For a head coach, they need to have everything that the assistant coach has, plus the sports specific course. Thank you everyone for attending either the in-person training or the online training. I know we do have a few coaches who still need to fulfill that, so there are two ways you can go about it. The one is an online course that I will talk about in a few slides, and the other is you can watch our online coaches training and take the follow-up quiz. So that is one way to fulfill that. And the last step that we have is the advanced coach. So an advanced coach fulfills everything that it takes to be a head coach, and then they also do the principles of coaching course. For renewing your volunteer and coach certifications, your volunteer application, protective behaviors, and concussion are still going to be a 3-year expiration. So once you do that, you are good to go for 3 years. It's the same with your sports-specific course. So you need to do that every 6 years, but every 3 years, you are going to need to complete an approved education and development opportunity. So I will touch on the next few slides about a few options for that, whether it's an online course or an in-person training. And this graphic is courtesy of Janet Larimore from Howard County. She put all of this together. She took basically just a regular piece of paper and made it into something that's easy to read and appealing on the eye. So thank you, Janet. All right, so the next few slides is a list of everyone who was listed as a coach in 2018 for athletics. If you do not see your name on this list, please don't panic. It could be that you were possibly entered in as a unified partner instead of a head coach or an assistant coach. So just send me an email if you don't see your name on this list, and we can make sure that you are good to go. I'll look up your certifications for you.
Kendall, this is Mike. Just a clarification on that. The folks that are on the list are only if they participated in 2018 and they have earned at some point a track and field certification. So if they participated in 2018 but haven't earned a track and field certification, they would not appear on there. So
awesome. Thank you for the clarification, Mike. All right, so coach trainings, we have this new great spot on our website, our coaches resource pages. So if you go to the first link, the coach resource page, it includes the links to all the volunteer and medical forms, as well as online protective behaviors and coach concussion training. I know dealing with a lot of different volunteers and assistant coaches, it is so much easier to just send them this link and they can find everything they will need instead of just sending out protective behaviors to these 3 select individuals and so forth. So this really will simplify the work on your end. We also have an athletics specific site. So it is that top link in the bottom there. On that page, you will see the information from our webinars, the rules that we have, the national governing body rules, all of the competitions that are scheduled, a lot of great information, some stuff on summer games. If you are looking at that website and you think to yourself, I wonder why blank isn't on this website, please send me an email. We are trying to make these pages as useful for you as possible. So if you can think of something that would better it, please just let me know and I can make sure that we include it. All right, so online training via Human Kinetics. So this is what I was referencing before when I said there is another online option that's not just doing the webinar with the follow-up quiz. There is a coaching track and field principles course through ACEP that you are able to take, and that will satisfy your sports certification. So Special Olympics Maryland will cover $20 worth of it. It's a $50 course, so the coach will end up paying about $30. Another thing that you can do is down underneath where it says general courses. This is where you can find our Coaching Special Olympics Athletes course. So we am reimbursed for the entire cost of that one, so it will cost the coach nothing. There's also the coaching principles and unified sport. So what is an improved course or development experience? Obviously, the two main ones are going to be our live sport-specific trainings that are in person. I always highly recommend attending these. I know that I'm a very visual in-person learner, and I like to do the demonstrations. So they are a great resource. We get great clinicians that come out and do so. And another thing that we have moved towards doing is a Special Olympics Maryland run online sport-specific training. So this year, Don Bewick did this for us, and he did a fantastic job. And then it's just followed by a follow-up quiz via SurveyMonkey, just so we can really test your knowledge and make sure that you learned something during the training. Any of the below listed things are potential for sport-specific trainings that can recertify you, so you'll be good to go for the season. Some of the general coaching courses that you were able to do would be the Coaching Special Olympics Athletes, Principles of Coaching, Unified Sports course. If you want to do a first aid course, as long as it's from an approved provider, that is totally fine. If you have any ideas on different courses or experiences that our coaches could get to renew this, please let us know. We are open to any and all suggestions. Just going to pause while I look and see if anyone has their hands raised. Nope, we're good to go. All right, the coach's code of conduct. So I know it is a lot of bullet points, so I'm just going to highlight the different segments. The first one is having respect for others. Second is ensuring a positive experience. This is a pretty big one. We are doing everything for our athletes to have a great experience. So when they step on to your field or your track at practice, making sure that not only are they working as hard as possible, but also that they are having a great time, they're being treated with respect, and that they are treating their teammates with respect as well. The next one is acting professionally and taking responsibility for my actions. As a coach, you are looked at as a role model to almost all of your athletes. So the way that you act is how they're going to act as well. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind as you're going through your training sessions. Quality service to the athletes and unified partners. This is why we're all here. We do it for the athletes. Whether you're a parent of an athlete or a sister of an athlete, or you have no connection to Special Olympics, you just decided to start coaching athletics and you got hooked on it, we're here for the athletes. So creating the experience for them, being a great coach to them, and offering them the resources that they really need to grow. And then the health and safety of the athletes and unified partners. This one's kind of self-explanatory. I don't really think we need to explain it too much. So rules with coaching. Coaching always tends to be a pretty big issue when we get near summer games for all of the sports that we offer. So only competing athletes, unified partners, and designated volunteers are allowed on the track. Coaches are not permitted on the track. Family members are not permitted on the track. Once the event has started, no coaching or instructional assistance is permitted. This not only applies to just coaches, but spectators as well. So it's always a great thing to remind families of. Teammates are allowed to confer with another before they step into the competition area. Once they're in that competition area, that is where they have to show off all the skills that they learned throughout the season on their own, so their teammates cannot help them out with that. There's summer games entries and the entry process. All athletes must compete in a minimum of 2 qualifying athletic competitions to be eligible for summer games. This is why I am really encouraging all counties to host a competition. Not only is it better practice for athletes, but say your athlete can't make one of the competitions and there's only 4 scheduled for the season, it's very difficult on them to be able to get to summer games. So the more competitive opportunities we offer, the more athletes we hopefully have that will qualify and will join us at Towson in June. Athletes may enter up to 3 individual events and up to 2 relays. So they can do the 4x200 and either the 4x100 or the 4x400. If you have an athlete who's doing the pentathlon, that's considered a single individual event. And all the events that are offered in the Special Olympics rulebook, which is linked to the coach's resource page, are going to be offered for competition at summer games, except races that are longer than 10K. All right, if you give me one moment, we have a question from Kathy. Kathy's question is, our coach is not allowed on the track except when also taking pictures with the photo credentials. So Ron, as the competition director for the track, I unmuted your line if you could advise Kathy on this question.
Well, you get, I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 photographers' credentials, and that's, whoever you designate as your photographer, can go out from the track and take pictures as long as you're not coaching at the same time. So if the coach is a photographer, that's fine, but there's still no coaching. But the photographer's credential is transferable among your delegation.
Awesome, thank you, Ron. All right, so event combination exclusions. If you have an athlete who's in the standing long jump, they cannot also do the long jump or the high jump. With the softball throw or tennis ball throw, that athlete is unable to participate in the shot put or the mini jab, but they also cannot enter both the softball throw and the tennis ball throw. They have to pick one or the other. With wheelchair events, they're open only to athletes who use the wheelchair to move. Motorized wheelchair users are not permitted in manual wheelchair events, and vice versa. They have to stick to their own event. And athletes that are entered in events shorter than 100 meters may not also enter wheelchair events for longer than the 100 meters. For running and walking events, athletes entered in events shorter than 100 meters may not also enter into running events longer than 100 meters. However, athletes in the 100-meter race may enter in the 50-meter race as part of a transition zone to try to help them move up, but just really test where they're at. Relays, they're only open to athletes who can run at least 100 meters. So, for example, you have an athlete who's in the 4x100 meter relay, they cannot be in the 25-meter race. So the big 3 percentages that we follow, the first one is with the 50-meter dash. So no more than 25% of your delegation for athletics athletes can be entered into this event. The next one is softball throw, and it's no more than 20% can be entered in this event. And with standing long jump, no more than 25% of your delegation's athletics athletes can be entered into here. So the reason that we do this is to move our athletes to more challenging and appropriate events. If you are in a unique situation, please just send me an email and let me know, and we can discuss it and see if we're able to kind of extend this percentage. So an example of a unique situation would be if you had a large group of young or low ability athletes joining the program. That's kind of something that we would take a minute and look at to see if there's something that we can do there. And if you give me one moment, we have actually, never mind. Thought we had a question, but we didn't. All right, so athletics events exit criteria. Several events in athletics are considered the fundamental events. 2 examples of this is the softball throw and the 50-meter race. So at summer games, delegations have frequently entered athletes whose abilities are above that fundamental level into these events. We really want them entering into events that match their ability and where they should be at. So athletes with the entries that are better than the criteria will not be permitted into the event. Athletes who earn a score that is better than this proposed criteria might be subject to disqualification at summer games. It is strongly recommended that you look at these numbers as you're trying to place your athletes in their different events to see where they belong. So this just kind of shows the number in 2017 and 2018 of athletes and where they stand in meeting our criteria. So for the softball throw, if you have an athlete who and throwing 20 meters, they should not be in the softball throw. You should be putting them in the mini jav. For the 50-meter race, if you have athletes who are running it in 10 seconds, they should definitely be bumping up to the 100-meter race. So this kind of just shows the comparison from 2017 to 2018. You guys made a lot of great changes, transitioning your athletes upwards. So we want to continue to keep on doing that. So some rules reminders from Special Olympics. The 800-meter race starts with the one-turn stagger. The 1,500-meter and longer races use a waterfall start. With relays, there's no longer a fly zone, so there's just an extended exchange zone, which is about 30 meters. With the 4x400-meter relay, it's a 3-turn stagger if there's more than 4 teams, and it's a 1-turn stagger if it's 4 or fewer teams. So there is a new USATF rulebook. I hyperlinked it to these slides, and I'll be sending them out to you. No major rule changes from them from the 2018 and 2019 rules. So if you want to glance through that, it's always a great refresher as we near the beginning of our athletics season. So for these rules reminders, I'm just going to highlight some of them, and then you can read them in your own time. So all field events are recorded to the next lowest centimeter. So if you measure something at 5 meters and 65.4 centimeters, it's going to be recorded as 5 meters and to 65 centimeters. For shot put, make sure that you're using the correct weight shot. So it differs between men and women, as well as age groups and wheelchairs. So if you have any athletes that fall into this category, please just reference this chart to see what exactly the weight should be of their shot put. With the mini jav, it must always land tip first. If it does not land tip first, then that is considered a foul. For the softball throw, any type of throw is permitted. It needs to land inside the inner edges of the sector line. With the standing long jump, it has to be a 2-foot takeoff, and you must jump with the toes of both feet behind the takeoff line. They do get disqualified if they walk back towards the takeoff line. So I know something that was discussed in the coaches' trainings that we've had this season has been to train your athletes to walk straight out or run straight out of that sand pit so they are not coming back towards the line. This is just a diagram that shows the softball and tennis ball throwing area. So the mini jav throwing vector is the same shape, but the box is going to be a little bit longer. So that box is 4 meters wide and 8 meters long. With the long jump, the front of the toe board is 1 meter from the edge of the sand pit. Athletes have to be able to jump at least 1 meter if they want to enter the event. If they don't reach the pit, it's a fault. Jumpers can place a marker on the side of the runway to know where they're supposed to be jumping. And the toe board is marked by white chalk. It's not an actual board. With the high jump, similar to the long jump, they must be able to jump at least 1 meter high to enter this event. There are no dives. That'll be an automatic disqualification, even if that's in warm-up. So some standard track colors are listed in this chart. However, standard is not always the standard. Make sure that you confirm correct start lines when you are attending a local competition. If it's a new track that you guys haven't participated on before, just make sure you know exactly where everything is because it can change sometimes. And when in doubt, measure it out. This just shows the location of all the different starting lines and relay zones. And this next one will show your typical location of starters. These are good resources for if you are hosting a competition and it's your first time. Line up your track with this. Make sure that the lines are on the same place, and you can really just use this as your key. All right, I'm just going to check for questions quickly. No, doesn't look like we have them. Great. Rules reminders for start. So all races will start with a gun. Athletes with hearing impairment should watch for a smoke gun. They may get a supplemental tap start or supplemental flag start at the starter's discretion. One cool thing that we are working to make happen for summer games this year is Maryland School for the Deaf in Frederick might be bringing a team of athletes. So if that is the case, we will be utilizing one of these ways to use a start gun with athletes with hearing impairment. So just keep your eyes peeled for that at summer games this year. For start, the races up to and including a 400 meter. You're going to use the 3-command start of on your marks, set, and then the gun fires. For races longer than 400 meters, they get a 2-command start of on your marks and then gun fires. Athletes are able to use starting blocks in races up to and including the 400-meter race. False starts are charged to the individual, not to the field, and if you have 2 false starts by the same runner, it results in a disqualification. Restart may be called if a stumble or similar problem in close proximity to the starter line. It's really at the starter's discretion, so they will make the call for that. With races, the athletes must race by him or herself. So coaches, family members, chaperones, you are not able to run with the athlete. Please do not run down the side of the track with the athlete. They will be disqualified if anyone runs with them, if it's on the track or even if it's on the other side of the fence. Like I kind of mentioned before with coaching, you trained your athletes all year. They are ready to go and ready to show what they're able to do. So really just give them that chance to do so. Visually impaired athletes adaptation. So they can use a guide rope or use a human guide provided by the meet if they are unable to use the rope. Athletes must stay in lane. Cutting into an inside lane is a disqualification. And in races run entirely on the straight part of the track, there's no disqualification for leaving a lane. Right, so these just kind of outline the races that we have with the 400-meter race, the stagger start, you run entirely in lanes. 800-meter race, also a stagger start. You have to stay in lane around the first turn, and then you can cut in. This actually differs from the FHS rules, but it is something that we do enforce. For longer than 800-meter race, it's a waterfall start, which is different than the other two, and they can immediately cut in. For finishing, the place of finish is determined by the order the racers cross the finish line, not the recorded times. It's based on the torso reaching the finish line as opposed to the head, arms, or feet. The torso is in the center of the body, so it's really a great indicator of when they actually finish. And if you have an athlete who's in a wheelchair, it's going to be when their front wheels cross that finish line. The assisted walks refers to the use of assistive devices such as walkers or tri-canes. Physical assistance from a coach or volunteer is not permitted and will result in the athlete being disqualified. With relays for the 4x100, it's a stagger start and you have to stay in your lanes throughout. Same goes with the 4x200 meter. The 4x400 meter, it's a stagger start. If you have more than 4 teams, it's a 3-turn stagger. So the first runners must stay in lanes throughout. The second runners must stay in lane around the first turn, and that should say, second runners can cut in at the break line after completing that first turn. For 4 teams or fewer, it's a 1-turn stagger, which is a newer rule change. The first runners must stay in lane around the first turn, and they can cut in at the break line after completing that first turn. So within relays, passing the baton, it needs to be done entirely within the exchange zone. Like I mentioned before, we no longer have fly zones. It's just that extended exchange zone of 30 meters. If it's dropped during the exchange, the incoming runner must pick it up and complete the exchange. With alternates and rosters, you may list alternates for your relays. They have to be entered in as a regular athlete in the overall event, and they have to be assigned to specific teams. There's a maximum of 2 alternates per team, or they can be an unassigned alternate. Alternates can't be regular runners on other teams, so they just have to be in that role as alternate. So the training suggestions when you don't have a track, I know how difficult it is to get facilities. So these are just some tips and tricks that you can do if you don't necessarily have a track that is available for your weekly use for your practices. So when you're doing races, you can mark lanes on sidewalk, asphalt, hallway floor using paint, tape, or chalk. You can practice the use of a gun, use a starter's pistol or a cap gun, approximate sound using blocks of wood smashing together. This will help the athlete's fear of the gun disappear over time. So it's a really good way to just start getting them adjusted to it. If you have a new athlete and they're a little bit sensitive to sounds, this is a great way to do it. Practice your starts and finishes if you can't practice the full length of races, and just do general running practice. Even without marked courses and tracks, is still beneficial. With your throwing events, you want to mark vectors on the sidewalk or whatever floor you're using, again, utilizing paint, tape, or chalk. With the shot put, you can practice with an indoor shot. You can practice without a toe board. Just mark a circle on the floor and ground, and safety first always. It is a push, not a throw. Trying to throw a shot put, just like a softball, can cause a lot of harm to an athlete. So we want to make sure that we are training them the proper way and that they are pushing out that shot put instead of tossing it. With the mini jab and softball throw, we strongly encourage athletes who throw the softball more than 10 to 15 meters to move to the mini jab or shot put. We kind of went through that slide that shows that that is the standard. Virtually any athlete who can throw a softball that distance can learn to throw the mini jabs. It's a little bit of a different throw, but they would definitely have the skill set to do so. With jumping events, it's obviously preferred for you to use an actual jumping pit, but I know they're not always readily available. You can use playground sandlots for practice. Competition will use actual jumping pits, not mats, just to make sure the athletes are accustomed to that. And do not ever attempt to train high jump without proper high jump equipment. We don't want our athletes getting hurt whatsoever, so make sure you have the proper equipment before you decide to do the high jump training. So additional resources that I have for you, again, just talking about the coaches resource page, this is such a great thing that we have created. It's super helpful. And like I said before, if you have anything that you think should be on there, please just let me know and we can include it. We want to make sure there's as many resources for all of you as coaches as possible. And it's a great thing to send out to all of your coaches and volunteers and even families of your athletes. That way they can really be in the loop with everything that is happening for the season. Some other resources that we have for you, if you need to order equipment or supplies, here are a few websites that you can do so through. And then we also just have some commercial websites with content and information. Like I said, I'll be sending this out tomorrow morning, so all of these links will be readily available to you. This is all that I have for all of you tonight. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns for the 2019 season, now would be a great time to ask them because we have about 30 minutes left in our scheduled webinar, so we have plenty of time.
Kendall, this is
Yes.
Mike. So yeah, we can fill up that 30 minutes. We don't need to. Just a couple quick points. As was noted, I don't know if folks saw it on the slide there, with the equipment suppliers. Getting shells, they can't FedEx shells or blanks for starter guns. Be sure to order them in advance. Periodically also there is a run on them and there's a shortage. I haven't seen or heard anything about that for this year as yet. We'll certainly keep our ears open for that, but it would not. It would be wise to get that to place your order in now for either your 22 or 32 blanks, 22 caliber or 32 caliber blanks. Just that you get them. It took us one time, not to scare you, but it took us a year to get an order filled because the backlog and the shortage was that bad. We do have a small supply at headquarters. But we can't promise to be able to outfit everyone. With that, if you don't already have a starter's gun, they're not cheap, but they're not ungodly expensive. You can get a pretty good one for between $100 and $200. Talk to your area leaders. There is no reason that any track program should not have a starter's gun to use for practices, even if you don't use it in every practice. The other thing, something I noticed at several track meets last year that luckily we could correct, several folks were not using the correct weight shots. It is 3 kilograms for the women and the young men, 4 kilograms for the adult men, or the 13 and up, actually, men. There is a difference between 3 kilograms and 6 pounds. 3 kilograms is actually 6.6 pounds. So be sure you weigh them. We actually were at one event, and kudos to Kathy Zubak, who noticed that the weight was off, but unfortunately about a dozen athletes had already been gone through and done their event. with the wrong weight shot, and so their scores were garbage at that point. So please be sure. One of the things that we do, many of you know, excuse me, I coach as a volunteer for track as well. We paint using fingernail polish, paint the weights on the shot so it's easy to know that we've got the right ones, and our athletes know that which ones to grab when they're using it. It's a quick and easy thing to do, and it makes a big difference. But again, you got to use the right weight shots, otherwise your scores are meaningless. And then last thing, on one slide, it indicated that for those who are athletes who are visually impaired, that the guide would be provided by the competition. That's certainly something that can be done, but with proper approval from Ron and his team, an area provided guide can be utilized as well. So if you choose to do that as opposed to using the rope with the baton on it. So that's all. I just wanted to touch on those three things, just lessons learned over the years.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. And I see, Steve Bennett, you have your hand raised, so your line is unmuted.
Yeah, Ken, as anybody else has any questions, I just want to make sure that we acknowledge all the coaches on the line and assistant coaches for everything they've done up to this point, and what you guys as coaches will be doing throughout the season to prepare your athletes. I know it's a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and a lot of dedication. Obviously, Special Olympics doesn't happen without volunteers dedicated like yourselves to give the athletes the opportunity to showcase their skills, as Kendall has said throughout the slide. So the state office, we just want to acknowledge everything that you guys have done and will be doing. So thank you for everything and all of your efforts.
Yes, to repeat, Steve, thank you guys so much for all that you do for our athletes. This is going to be my first athletic season, and I am super excited about it. If anyone has any other questions, comments, or concerns, now would be the time to either raise your hand or type your question into the box. I'll give it another minute before we end the webinar.
While folks are going through and thinking of their questions, if I can just ask, one of the things that we've offered before, and I'd be happy to offer it again and brush it up a bit, is we've offered online officials training. Can also do it live, but can do it. It takes about 2 hours or so, but goes through officiating and running a track meet. Haven't offered it for the last couple of years because there didn't seem to be interest, but by a show of hands, using your hands in the box, if you could just click on there if you think that's something that would be beneficial for your area, not just for your coaches. It can also be for the people who are running your spring games or your track meet if you're hosting a track meet. And such, would be more than happy to do it. And it would count for those of you who are coaches. It would count as a recertification. It wouldn't be good for an initial track and field certification, but it would certainly be good for renewal. So okay, see enough there that it's probably worth pursuing that. Thank you. We'll look at calendars and look to do something probably early in April, so folks can utilize it for the season. Thanks.
Awesome. If there's no other questions, then I will end tonight's webinar. Thank you, everyone, for logging on. Like I said, I'll send out everything tomorrow. If you have any questions that you think of before tomorrow when I send out the information, feel free to send me an email, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you all. Have a great night.